What's up guys, Derek, moreplates.com. Today we're going to be talking about adrenal steroids and can they still contribute to hair loss? Even if you're castrated, can you still get male pattern baldness? That's what we're going to be digging into in this one. So some of the hardcore hair loss prevention methods can go as far as shutting down the endogenous HPTA, is what most people call it. It's really HPG axis, which we all know is essentially what determines your body signaling to produce testosterone and subsequently DHT by extension after interaction with 5-alpha reductase. So if you shut yourself down, your endocrine function is just like down-regulated to fuck to the point that you're not even producing testosterone anymore. How could you possibly still have anything going on? And what a lot of people don't realize is the adrenals produce steroids on their own, which then have downstream cascades that can lead to testosterone and DHT still. How significant is this though? Not overly significant on paper in serum, which is interesting. Like I did show in the past where I've taken a milligram of dutasteride for a year straight on a daily basis and it fucking crushed my DHT levels to that of a prepubescent female. Probably even less than that, to be honest. There's probably less DHT than a fucking baby, to be honest. That's how low it was. It was undetectable. But the adrenals can still produce trace androgens, and by extension through a backdoor pathway that is on something that can't be accounted for with 5-alpha reductase inhibition, can still result in scalp DHT levels, which is something that's not necessarily going to show up in a blood test either, which is something we're going to be digging into now. So this is the steroidogenesis of DHT via classical, alternative, and backdoor pathways. This is cholesterol as it goes through CYP11A1 and goes through pregnenolone, DHEA, and these are kind of the pathways in which it eventually gets to androgen receptors over here and activates the AR and can then transcribe effects in tissues, which ultimately is what leads to the hair follicle miniaturization that we're familiar with. So here, a chain of events is pregnenolone goes to DHEA, goes over here all the way down to testosterone, which then goes through 5-AR, which then turns into DHT, which then, as a consequence of being DHT, being so androgenic, causes the hair loss after binding to the androgen receptor. When you take finasteride, what it does is it inhibits this conversion right here from testosterone to DHT. So you think problem solved, right? Well, first of all, you may not be inhibiting enough DHT to completely prevent hair loss if you're using just finasteride, and even if you're doing it with the dutasteride, you're causing a subsequent spike in scalp testosterone, which is being unaccounted for, which is also an androgen. But anyways, you can see here an alternative pathway. In addition to that, there's a backdoor pathway down here that no one is accounting for, going through allopregnenolone to CYP17A1, all the way down through oxidative enzymes can take this process here and bring it all the way to, again, this is a very minor amount of turning into DHT, but it's notable nonetheless. Now, the good thing about the alternative pathway is it still requires 5-alpha reductase to get from here to here in both scenarios. So if you have a 5-AR blockade with an inhibitor like finasteride or dutasteride, you're essentially preventing not only testosterone from 5-alpha reducing to DHT, but also this process from occurring, which then can cause the synthesis of DHT via an alternative pathway. The thing you can't do necessarily, and again, that would also indirectly prevent this from metabolizing and going through 3-alpha hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase, because you would have not been able to get through that first 5-AR blockade to begin with up here. However, through pregnenolone and allopregnenolone in the backdoor, you have CYP17A1, which can go through here and go through this process up into DHT. How much does this happen? Is it significant? Maybe, maybe not. One thing I would defer to though, which this process isn't something to burden your mind with too much. It's more kind of elucidating that there's other ways in which your body can fuck around to get around the inhibition of 5-AR to still synthesize some of the stuff in the tissues it needs to. The thing I want to bring the attention to is the fact that adrenal steroids can actually still account for a significant amount of androgen receptor activation that's going unaccounted for. So not only if you inhibit 5-AR, do you have a giant spike in scalp testosterone, which is being totally unaccounted for and is still miniaturizing hair follicles and requires an anti-androgen to complete a more comprehensive approach to hair loss prevention. It doesn't need to be an anti-androgen. It can be potentially a selective androgen receptor modulator. It could be a AR agonist that is more tissue selective. There's a bunch of different ways to go about it, but the general approach is a topical anti-androgen like RU58841 or CB0301. But even if you were literally castrated, how much AR activation can adrenal steroids produce that are being unaccounted for here? This is an interesting video I came across, and I don't even remember how I came across it, but I bookmarked it because it was super notable. They were looking at a very powerful anti-androgen called enzalutamide and outlining how parameters of survival were improved in AR positive cancers or something like that, because basically they address the androgen receptor as opposed to just shutting down hormone production through the endocrine system. So let me just let this guy talk. He's going to outline it better than I can, and then I'll kind of make my commentary after. So basically in that video, they're outlining how if somebody has cancer that is, progressing as a result of androgen receptor activation, one of the approaches they take to kind of mitigate its growth is to just castrate the guy, which then prevents the production of androgens, testosterone, and subsequently DHT that would otherwise bind to AR and cause progression of that cancer. Above and beyond that, though, they're basically saying castration wasn't sufficient, and the production of adrenal steroids that actually are unaffected by castrating an individual were contributing 25% to AR activation in the prostate, which is incredibly high compared to what I thought previously, what you would expect, because when you see these numbers in the serum, they're minuscule in comparison to what you would otherwise see from your endogenous androgen production. But in practical application, AR activation is what matters. So 25% at your prostate, and typically we see similar outcomes in the scalp when we're looking at 5-AR dense areas of the body. So it's not wild to think that a significant amount of the adrenal steroids are causing AR activation in the scalp as well. So what kind of implications does this have? Now, you heard him mention how they had improved success by adding an enzalutamide, and the reason for that is because it's a non-steroidal anti-androgen, and the way it works is similar to something like RU58841. It binds to the AR and prevents the adrenal steroids and their cascade of events from eventually leading to AR activation and causing the continued progression of this cancer. So 25% of AR activation being accounted for by adrenals is insane, considering how minuscule of an amount of testosterone and subsequently DHT you're actually getting through the amount of hormones that really trickle out of that. So what kind of implications does this have for hair loss? Basically, it sort of just further reinforces the whole point of using an anti-androgen, because when you use something like finasteride, dutasteride, you're taking care of just DHT. You take care of the 5-alpha reductase enzyme, and you take care of the 5-alpha reduction into DHT to a significant extent with finasteride, but pretty much a nearly nuclear extent with dutasteride. However, it does absolutely nothing to take care of the subsequent increase in the scalp testosterone levels that happens when you prevent it from 5-alpha reducing to DHT. You now have way more test that would have otherwise converted to DHT that's now stuck as testosterone and is elevated in the scalp. can cause hair loss. Above and beyond that, you have these adrenal steroids, which can also bind to AR and have cascades of events that lead to the metabolization and production of other androgens that bind to AR too. Does 5-alpha reductase inhibitors do anything to prevent those from causing hair loss? No, they don't at all. The only thing that can do that is the anti-androgen. So for me, this just further reinforces the comprehensive approach where 5-AR blockade may be sufficient for some individuals, but for those with more aggressive loss, it's an almost undoubted certainty. That's not even a fucking word. It's almost I would almost guarantee that you would probably need to deploy a combination of 5-alpha reductase inhibition alongside at least some level of androgen receptor antagonism on the scalp. And that is kind of the comprehensive approach where you have all your ducks in order and you're not like leaving a giant hole in your boat, so to speak, where you're kind of like, maybe it's not as bad as having the DHT floating around, obviously, but if you still have something eating away at your hair that is less potent by several fold, but is still potent nonetheless, it's eventually going to happen. So this is, down the line, finasteride and dutasteride may seemingly just be stopping working, when in reality, it's not the case. You've just been slowly losing your hair this whole time, and it's just been slower because you took care of the DHT, but you didn't take care of the fucking adrenal steroids, the testosterone, the spike in scalp testosterone. None of that shit is being accounted for. Androgen receptors are still being attached to and bound and fucking activated, and things are going on. So the comprehensive approach is 5-AR blockade if needed. Above and beyond that, also addressing AR activation. So that is just a bit of a learning opportunity, in my opinion, and just further elucidates how much we don't actually understand about the human body. And we think it's just, people still think just DHT causes hair loss. Like, I've shown so many fucking times at this point that it's not. It's all the androgens. All androgens can cause hair loss. You can fucking castrate yourself and take a bunch of Masteron and cause just as much fucking hair loss with 0 DHT in your body. You could take fucking Tren. You can do things that aren't DHT derivatives if you want to argue that the chemical structure of synthetic analogs are structurally similar to DHT, so they don't count. Well, let's look at 19-Nors. Let's look at testosterone derivatives. Let's look at fucking anything that is a androgen in any context, and at a high enough dose it can cause hair loss. So it's not just DHT, it's testosterone, and it's all the other androgens in the body, and AR needs to be addressed for a more comprehensive protective approach. So that is the moral of the story. So thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplacemordates.com. If you want to get sent my deep dives into hair loss pharmacology, then I recommend you subscribe to the newsletter. It's the first link in the description below. You won't get sent those articles if you don't sign up, and they are far more elaborate and detailed than my videos, but they also have hyperlinks to all the clinical studies I reference and are split up into concise subsections with a table of contents and are just laid out very professionally and proofread multiple times, rather than me just kind of like throwing information around like a maniac, because I kind of just go off the cuff in the videos, whereas the articles are all, like I said, professionally laid out and just really reflect my highest quality of that information, I guess is the best way to put it. If you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm associated with in the video description below. If you want to check out my comprehensive blood test panels, you can get those through my HRT clinic, linked in the description below, for assessing any hormonal imbalances or deficiencies you may have prior to starting either 5-AR inhibition or using an anti-androgen or anything like that. If you want to get access to pharma-grade hair loss meds that I use, you can check those out in the description below as well. Pretty much anything and everything that is prescribable in the States, we have access to right now, and I would recommend you check some of the stuff out if it interests you. Pretty much all the stuff I get is through there, with exception of my RU58841 for the most part, and then some novel chemicals that are not even fucking approved for human use, obviously, that I use not through the clinic, but those are more for experiments and whatnot, but that's besides the point. The mainstream stuff is all through the clinic, and it is pharma grade from a compounding pharmacy and prescribed by a doctor, so you can travel with it and all that good shit. So check that out if you're interested. Anything else I'm associated with, video description below. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.